Vacancy Legal Recruitment, a refreshingly unique and personal talent agency developed specifically for legal. Dedicated to the sector and with extensive experience working across legal services and legal technology, we bridge the gap between your requirements and top-tier legal talent. Get in touch today and say hello at vacancy.co.uk.
You're listening to the Today's Conveyancer podcast, the leading source of information for residential property lawyers in England and Wales. Don't forget to subscribe and sign up to our free newsletter at todaysconveyancer.co.uk. You can also follow us on LinkedIn and Twitter.
Hello, welcome to the latest Today's Conveyancer podcast. Today I'm delighted to be joined by Scott Bozinis, CEO of InfoTrack. Fair to say, Scott, that you don't always seek out the publicity, but you are a pretty high profile person in the industry, 10 years in the UK as well, having come over from Australia all those years ago. Topic of today's discussion, I'd really like to kind of talk to you about who you are and some of your experience of being over here and just track that journey of InfoTrack over the past 10 years as well. But appreciate you joining the podcast. Thanks so much.
Hi, David. Thank you for having me. I appreciate this opportunity. Yes, you are correct. I probably prefer to be designing software or behind a keyboard more than on a microphone. I won't shy away from that. But I think it's a good time for us to have this conversation. We are very proud at InfoTrack that it's been 10 years now, and we are talking about that a little bit more because I think we've got a really good story to tell. I think we're part of the fabric of the conveyancing industry, and we'd love to share our thoughts and ideas of what 10 years has been like, and maybe dare to dream what 10 more years would look like.
I'm going to dive right in with who are you and what do you do? I said that you're the CEO of the UK business, but you came from Australia originally, in the InfoTrack business from Australia, presumably.
Yeah, that is true. A little bit of background there. My history is, and some people know this, but I still think it's quite quaint to this very day, that my mum and dad not only worked in the land registry in Melbourne, they also met in the land registry. So if something's in someone's blood, then here I am on the other side of the world still working in conveyancing and land registry and the like. So that's probably a clue to how I ended up doing what I was doing. That journey took me to join the InfoTrack business in around 2010, which was about 15 years ago. I had a wonderful 5 years in our business in Sydney and really started to understand conveyancing a little bit at that stage. I think the industry was just sort of digitized at that point, and what we mean by that, Australia and the UK, very similar systems, and that was that a lot of the paper files were being scanned and taken out of paper format and into a digital format, and that would be the land registries and a lot of council records. So I sort of joined the industry just at a time that the internet was spooling up and people were getting information online for the first time. And so 5 years in Sydney doing that, and then an opportunity arose to come to the UK, and I think through nothing else but sense of adventure, that sounded like a fun thing to do.
We were just chatting before we started to record, and it's always that classic question, how long did you intend to stay and how long do you intend to stay? But you were saying that it wasn't necessarily the plan to kind of set a time that you were going to be here. It was a case of, you'll be here for as long as you were needed.
Yeah, I think from someone suggesting, would you like to create the InfoTrack brand in the UK, to me being on the ground I think it was a matter of weeks. It was a short decision process. I think going into it very open-minded, definitely going into it naive and with an open-ended ticket, it takes a lot of the pressures away, and you just enjoy the journey because you don't know where it's headed. You don't know how long it'll last. I'm very settled in the UK now. The UK is home, and it will be for as long as it makes good sense and is good fun, and that probably could be forever.
What about you was naive about the UK?
I think the naivety was just how much work it takes to get a business off the ground. If I had known that, I wonder if I would have done it differently. But starting a business from very, very basic things there is nothing. I don't think people quite understand what nothing looks like, but renting an empty office and walking in and there's nothing. And, you think you're there to create product, but first of all, you've got to buy some desks, hang a clock on the wall and, actually make the entity itself form. So I maybe underestimated that, but you don't sometimes want to know the work that you have to put in that'd take the fun away.
What was the business in Australia doing around the time that you've come over? So this is 2015. 2013, Australia starts this big sort of drive for digitization, doesn't it? And it goes on that journey very quickly as well.
Yeah, look, I think there is a little bit of a misnomer that Australia is more digitised. I don't think that's true. In fact, Australia in many ways wasn't as sophisticated. When I was in the Australian business, properties were physically completed on. People met physically and someone handed over a title and someone handed over a wad of cheques and some documents were exchanged. So when I left Australia, that was still predominantly happening. And so to look to Australia and always just blindly say it was advanced is not the case. I think the UK had already was transferring funds digitally like it does today, and registration was happening via APIs and websites to the land registry. Whereas when I was in Australia, and this was my job at times, we were exchanging checks for titles in person, and then we were queuing up at a counter to have documents lodged. So I think that's a really good thing to note. And then companies like PEXA came along and worked with government frameworks and were able to really solve that problem that I just described. But that problem had already been solved in the UK. So yeah, I think that's a good thing to clear up. That wasn't as digital. There are other areas of the Australian market that I think were more digital, a lot more. Being a newer country, a lot more documents were digitised and scanned and available digitally, whereas I think the UK, with its history, a lot of the documents aren't. So I don't think it's just one versus the other. So I know that now, having been privileged enough to work in both markets, but I didn't know any of that when I came here, that's for sure.
So if a sense of adventure brought you over here, what did landing in the UK sort of feel like? I mean, you described the fact that you had to go out and buy some desks and a clock to start with.
Felt cold and dark because it was January and I was jet lagged. But I love work. I always have. And I think there was just work to do and I loved it. Let's just get going. What do we need? How much fun to have a company credit card and just get going, buy some computers, buy some screens, rent an office, buy some desks. We took a copy of the code base we had in Australia and tried to manipulate it as much as we could to make it work over here. And yeah, we just got going. We had a purpose. We knew, what to do. And we needed to sell our first land title register or local authority search via our website. So, it was just, let's just get going. Let's just do it.
The business bought the STL search business, didn't it, pretty quickly? Did that give you a bit of a foothold to make a start, if you like, from those early beginnings?
Absolutely, massively. We wouldn't be where we were without that initial acquisition of STL. The knowledge, the network, the people that understood the local authority search, particularly the regulated local authority search, the ability to produce that product, that is the most different thing from the Australian market. We can bring our technology know-how and we can understand land registries and things that we're familiar with in Australia. But the knowledge, the big gap was the regulated search and the ability to, be able to deliver that product. And that was the huge gap that STL filled and was, the best thing we did to get us going. And still to this very day, there's high numbers of staff in the business from that acquisition 10 years ago. And so, whilst InfoTrack is 10 years old, there are people in our business in the UK that have been in the group 20, 25 years because of that acquisition. And, you can't do this on technology alone. You need a lot of experience and a lot of knowledge, and that's what the STL acquisition brought.
I asked you before we started recording whether you would describe yourself as an entrepreneur, and you said no, but you said that you were more of a technologist and you're looking for problems to solve. Back in 2015, your list of problems to solve must have been more than the length of an arm.
Yes, I see myself as a product person, and that is, using technology to create products to solve problems. I think one of the things InfoTrack does well is we don't look to change the way people work. True automation is often just automating what already exists. And I formerly was an automation engineer, and I think that's what we do today. So it was clear that conveyancers in the UK were doing lots of things that technology meant they don't need to do them anymore. And, they're well-worn paths, they're well-worn marketing slogans today, but all under one roof, one single login, no rekeying of information integrated to your case management system. But in truth, none of that was happening 10 years ago. There was lots of rekeying, there was logging into multiple systems, and it just felt very fragmented. So as a, said technologist, I think you can look at that and say, I'm not going to change the way you work, but what I will do is bring that all together and take away some of the laborious tasks of keying information in, which, naturally can lead to errors and low enjoyment of work sometimes. So yeah, it was good to be able to look at a problem and solve it, but fundamentally not change the process, because that's a well-established process and it's not our job to change the process.
That's a really interesting thought, because there are an awful lot of people out there, and perhaps even within property technology as well, who feel that there needs to be a re-engineering of the process, that the fact that we're governed by an act that came in 100 years ago and doesn't really account for the way that the modern world works needs rethinking. Is not your view particularly?
I I don't disagree that there's very few things that wouldn't benefit from modernisation, and this industry is no different. So I think there's reform that would do wonders for this industry. But first and foremost, there were just some low hanging fruit to solve. We can come here and lobby for reform and say we're going to change the way this industry works. But why don't you just put your toe in the water and start from the bottom up and start fixing some of the obvious things, and then maybe as time goes on, it self-reforms, or people look up and go, gee, the problem that I thought is a problem is not actually a problem anymore. I'm not a big AI spruiker. You're not going to hear me saying AI is going to be the be-all and end-all. But a really good example was that 10 years ago, AI didn't exist. But here it is today. And as people who use technology platforms like InfoTrack are using them, AI can slowly be introduced and can solve problems that 10 years ago we didn't know the answer to. But we just got going with work that looked like it needed to be done, and we will keep just introducing little things. But had we turned up and said, AI will just do everything, it's magic, just sit back and relax, it won't work. So maybe another way of rephrasing that, we're not a big bang approach. We're not going to turn everything on its head. But little and often we all go on a journey together, and we might look back and go, gee, half of the problems that we thought problems, they're not problems anymore. But don't get me wrong. I mean, there's areas of the industry that needs government leadership and needs leadership that I can't bring, that we benefit from in reform. But definitely the legal side of it isn't my core expertise.
I suggested that you hide your light under a bushel, Scott, and InfoTrack has become, over the past 10 years, one of the, if not the largest, certainly search provider in the UK market, and probably sort of technology provider as well. Has the business developed in the way that you thought it might, and in the way that you hoped it might? I mean, presumably the fact that it's fairly sizable means that you're doing something right, but success is never a straight line, is it?
No, it's definitely not, and there's been all sorts of moments on the journey, but yeah, I do think we're a larger business now. There's no point talking about that. What does that bring? There's not a humbleness to talking about that. That's a pointless exercise. However, if you have a lot of clients and conveyancers on a platform, we do have an opportunity to evolve an industry and use that position to improve communication, improve approach, standardize. So I think that's a side benefit of InfoTrack has had success. Again, I'm comfortable talking about that because that's a little self-fulfilling, but how can we use our success? How can we use our larger market position and share to say, do you know what? We can probably solve more problems that smaller businesses couldn't. And I think that's something that really excites me going forward, is saying, what now can we do that maybe we couldn't have done as a smaller company? And I think, some things are opening up there.
Do you think that InfoTrack has kind of reshaped the way that conveyancers do their jobs in some way? Is that a grandiose statement, perhaps?
I guess conveyancers, they'll tell us if we have or not. I've heard nice stories along the way. I heard people tell us through the pandemic that without some of the technology we had, that they wouldn't have been able to operate their business, but they could go home, open up a web browser, log in, and just keep going. And with, if they had been doing it the ways they were doing it previous to us, they wouldn't have been able to onboard their clients digitally, but they could do that. So there were some nice stories along the way that told us that, their businesses operate better and in fact can operate because of our technology. So, that's appreciative. Look, I probably do think, without making big statements, that we have evolved the way the industry works. I know the numbers of users on our platform, and it is a large number now, and many of them are doing things that I think is a much better way of doing things, tightly integrated to case management, but from our platform, then tightly integrated to lenders, tightly integrate, through partners like LMS, tightly integrated to the land registry, tightly integrated to local government information, and with technology to produce documents and lodge documents. Yeah, I probably think it is a different way of working. And sometimes these things happen slowly, and I think if we stopped and did a comparison of how it looked 10 years ago to how a modern InfoTrack client looks today, I think we will have forgotten how far we've come. And, I am pleased by that. And maybe we have changed the way our conveyancers work just a little bit, and for the best.
There is a criticism of platforms that might be described as kind of insular, in that there are in that conveyancing requires, 2, 3, 4,000 firms to all be involved. And there's no way that all of those organizations operate on the same platform. Open source is going to be increasingly important, I think personally, in the industry over the course of the next few years. What's InfoTrack's view on that, and how, if you are sort of pro open source, how are you making sure that you're working with this proliferation of technology that's out there?
I love this question. This is what's going to keep me busy and motivated for the next 5 years. InfoTrack operates in 5-year cycles, and at 10 years, we've just completed 2 of those. And I'm sitting here thinking, what does the next 5-year cycle look like for our business and my own brain and technology interest? And that is it. You're right. No one provider can solve it, and conveyancing is one big interlinked network. Every conveyancer works with every other conveyancer at some point in the journey, and we've got to be interlinked, and we can't do that. So I think it's a fascinating question. A large section of that community hopefully will be on the InfoTrack platform and they can interlink, but that's not it. And I think the working together with other large vendors and other large players and working out how to do that is a fantastic problem to solve. I think governments will solve that. So private commercial entities and some good associations will work together and solve that. So that is a fascinating problem to solve, because you've got your commercial interests, but then you've got the need to actually genuinely improve an industry, which I think many of us, are in the industry to do. We're not just here to be in business or anything else. We're in here as technologists to make life better for an industry. So I love the question. I love the thought. I haven't answered you yet on, open source versus closed source. And, it's tricky in technology land. You can, when lots and lots of different pieces of technology come together, they don't always work that well. And when you have sort of one provider that's able to build, Apple's piece of magic back in the day was it was able to control the hardware and the software. And that was the big difference it had over everybody else. That doesn't work in conveyancing, and it's not going to work here, but it is an interesting insight that you can go full open source and never quite get it right, or you can go full closed walled garden and just alienate too many people, and the balance sits somewhere in the middle. So I love the question is, as a technologist, what is the right position? Where does it land in the middle to get both high quality software that integrates well, but understand, many entities have to work together. And, I think that's our challenge for the next 5 years. And I'm up for that challenge.
I sense there's a balance between profits and philanthropy, if we can perhaps describe it like that, because, there's a lot of very, very good technology that's entered this marketplace over the past few years, some of which will sadly fall by the wayside because it will simply run out of money.
Mm.
But then you've got somebody like an InfoTrack who've, in the politest possible way, have got some sizable coffers behind them. The onus is really on you to make sure that you are playing your role in making sure that openness that the industry needs kind of happens.
Yeah, good question. For me personally, I'm obsessed with technology. I just want to solve problems and I want to solve all of the challenges that conveyancers face. I won't, but I want to, and so I'll see how far I can get. I understand what you're saying about InfoTrack is in a position that it is, financially stable enough to be able to do this. And I think that's good. We have the financial stability to keep going. And then with our business brain on and our interest in technology, hopefully we can solve a lot of these challenges. And, hopefully we are good for the industry because we are a balance of both.
I'm not suggesting that organizations like you have a responsibility to the smaller organizations. I think what I'm saying is that you perhaps do have a responsibility to foster that open source and collaborative culture.
Potentially. It is a good question. It is philanthropy, as you say, which is as hard to say as anything for me, that word. But yeah, I haven't really thought deeply about that. I think, we're problem solvers at our core. So I'm working backwards from problems that we identify in industry. But if this is the next problem to solve, then we will solve that. I back us as incredible problem solvers, as engineers that can, solve what's ever put in front of us. And if that's the next problem to solve, we'd love to be a part of that conversation.
There is a recognition in the King's Award that InfoTrack was recently the recipient of, that the business has played a role and a significant role in the property and conveyancing market.
Thank you. I think so too. I think at a level, it's a recognition that conveyancing is an incredibly important industry to this country, and that the Prime Minister's office, who runs the King's Award, was aware of the conveyancing industry, aware of the innovation that's taking place. We were, a part of that. And at a personal level, I got to go to Windsor Castle and meet the King. What a great story, what a great thing for our industry. Yeah, it was just a wonderful experience. But, at the most serious level, is not just acknowledging the journey that InfoTrack's had and some of the innovations it's been a part of, but the industry, was seen and recognised at that level. I think that's a wonderful thing for our industry as we allow people to buy and sell homes in this country, one of the most, enjoyable, should be enjoyable and important experiences in a life.
Enjoyable in inverted commas, perhaps. You'll be pleased to know, Scott, we're moving towards the end of the discussion, and I'm going to come back and end the discussion just a little bit on you and perhaps a bit about what the future might look like as well. What do you wish you had known 10 years ago that you know now?
That's a good question. Part of me doesn't. I don't think I do. I don't think you want to know what a slog it is in the early days, because you might get scared off. If it is one thing, it's probably that it's going to work out in the end, because there are moments there where it is hard and you face some, tough decisions, or you have some failures, and your biggest fear of any business starting from scratch is not going to work out. But that would have taken the joy of the unknown away. But that we are going to be okay, and not just okay, we are going to be in a position to actually really achieve and make a change. And yeah, I wish I knew that, but I get the joy maybe of reflecting on that just now, looking backwards.
What about a proudest moment? Have you got something that you can kind of put your finger on, or a point in time where you can say, do you know what? Yeah, that was really something. You can't use the King's Award either, because you've used that one.
Proudest moment, that is a good question. I did get emotional once at a company update where I think when I looked up, and it might have been just an early anniversary of the business, that so many people had joined the company and believed our journey and believed the story. Because before you have a company or clients or anything, you need a bunch of people who just believe in you and join the journey. And I think there was a proud moment where I looked up and saw so many people who believed the journey, who got on board, and everything we sort of thought we were going to do, we did. But it was very proud that we're able to execute that, and that so many people sort of, took a job with InfoTrack and moved from doing something else to working with us. And it was a very proud moment for us all that we'd, been able to execute on a plan that we thought would work.
It's been great to have you on the podcast, Scott, and I'm very appreciative of all of your time. I've got one final question that I want to ask, which is your personal hopes and ambitions for the next 5 to 10 years.
From an industry perspective, that we're able to continue to work together and really make this industry the best it can be from an efficiency and operational perspective, and that, as a group of passionate people, both legal and technologists, that we came together. And this is an industry that's been asked to do more and more work every year with all of the tasks that are required of it. And not only did we overcome that we're able to apply technology and really make this industry a great industry to work in, and do its job of transacting the largest asset class in the country in a beautiful and seamless way.
It's a utopian view, but if we don't aim for the stars, then we might not make it to the moon, might we?
That's right, but we might still just get to the stars regardless.
Scott, I'm really appreciative of your time this morning. Thanks so much for joining the podcast and for sharing your story as well.
I've really enjoyed it. Thank you for having me today, David.
The Today's Conveyancer podcast is available on your preferred podcast provider. It's also available on todaysconveyancer.co.uk. My thanks to Scott. Thank you as ever for listening, and we'll see you again soon.